You got a whole lot of vinyls too, man.
Yeah. Wow, that's kind of bright too. This is better.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's way better.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Yeah,
much.
no problem. No problem.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We're just giving way for folks to make it in to the Zoom.
Okay.
Claudia,
Sí, dígame, hermano.
me acabo de dar cuenta que mi apellido está mal escrito. ¿Se puede arreglar eso si no le importa?
No creo que nosotros tenemos el control. Creo que puedes cambiarlo tú en la... Sí, si le das a los 3 botones arriba.
Los 3 botones arriba.
De tu frame. Ahí debes de tener la posibilidad de cambiar.
¿Cómo se escribe? Te lo puedo arreglar.
Placencia.
Oh.
I wrote it in the chat.
¿Y cómo lo hago para volver atrás? A ver. Ahí, acá.
Bien.
Pero ahora veo...
Sí, te lo cambió. Ya.
Ah, sí. Ah, ya lo entiendo. Es que hace un par de segundos había más gente, ahora solamente veo a ti y a Cece.
Sí, pero estamos todos acá.
Ah, ya. Genial.
So, hello everyone. My name is Claudia de la Cruz, and I am with the People's Forum. Very excited to be here in another installment of the Green Room and with amazing folks. We are going to do a co-facilitation tonight. But before we get further into the program, I would like to pass on the mic to Alvaro and Julieta, who are going to be doing interpretation for us.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por tenernos al Foro del Pueblo. Les quería dar un anuncio sobre el evento de hoy que se va a realizar de manera bilingüe. Entonces, hola, los organizadores del evento de hoy tienen la firme determinación de crear un espacio multilingüe y contamos con interpretación disponible en español o inglés para ayudar a crearlo. El evento se realizará en inglés, en español y en forma bilingüe. Les pedimos a todos los participantes que hablen despacio y en voz alta y clara en sus micrófonos para facilitar la interpretación. Dentro de unos minutos activaremos la interpretación para este evento y si usted está usando la aplicación de Zoom, podría ver el icono de un mundo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Haga un clic en el mundo para escuchar la interpretación y seleccione español o, bueno, vamos a tener un canal para gente que no es bilingüe. Cuando alguien está hablando en inglés, lo vamos a traducir a español y cuando alguien está hablando en español, lo vamos a traducir a inglés. Si tiene algún problema de respeto, por favor escriba un comentario en el chat. Y con eso se lo paso a Julieta, que me va a ayudar con la interpretación el día de hoy.
Hola. Hi, everyone. The organizers of today's event have made a commitment to creating a multilingual space. To help create that space, we have interpretation available onto English and Spanish. The event will be held in English, Spanish bilingually. We ask that all participants speak slowly and loud and clear into their microphones to make the interpretation easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alvaro and Julieta. We really appreciate your willingness and your constant disposition to support the People's Forum's work. We encourage folks to write comments and questions on the chat throughout. We will be keeping an eye out for them. We're having this as a facilitated conversation, and after the conversation, we'll have space for questions and answers. So please do engage via the chat, even if it's to shout out where you're logging in from, because we have international guests today, and so we want to make sure that you know, our folk feel loved, because that's what we're about. We're about spreading love. So before passing on the mic over to my comrade and sister Struggle Sierra, who is going to be co-hosting with me tonight, I wanted to share a little bit about the Green Room. The Green Room is a place where culture creators build politically and socially. I mean, a lot of the times when we go into, you know, performances or venues, there's a green room, and a lot of people think of it only as a space for waiting until the performance is there. But those of us who have been around culture workers and artists know that it's a space for building bridges of collaboration and preparing to go back into the world, you know, and share cultural offerings that move the hearts and minds of the people. So we at the People's Forum have created this virtual space to hold space with cultural workers and creatives who are working towards collective struggles, and supporting our people as we engaged in, you know, the battles that we need to endure as workers and people who are historically marginalized. And so on behalf of the People's Forum, we welcome you all to the Green Room. And without further ado, Sierra.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Claudia. My name is Sierra. I help out with membership and programming at the People's Forum. I'm so excited for tonight's conversation. It's very timely. This is our second installment. And as many of you all know, we are living in unprecedented times, as my sister comrade Claudia would say. Not only are we experiencing uprisings and rebellions in over 200 cities across the United States, and even more around the world, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. We are still in the midst of an economic crisis. In the last 11 weeks, we have seen over 100,000 deaths due to the COVID-19, senseless deaths, deaths that are disproportionately Black and poor. And while, you know, we're experiencing this, we're also in the midst of an economic crisis that was happening prior to the pandemic. We have people right now, I think 44.1 million people are currently filing for unemployment. And that doesn't count the people who haven't filed, people who can't file, like our undocumented family. And meanwhile, the billionaire class has racked up 20% increased earnings, you know, as of June 11th. And that's 560, no, actually, now it's $637 billion billionaires have experienced, while we understand that after this pandemic, 42% of the jobs that were there prior to the pandemic will no longer be. And so we've seen throughout history that moments when the ruling class, when these huge corporations and their corporate political puppets and corporate controlled media don't have answers for how to provide for the working class or what to do with the working class, this is when we start to see enormous violence in our communities and in working class and poor communities around the world. And it's being expressed right now, particularly in the role of police brutality. And, you know, in the midst of this, the rebellions, you go outside and you see all sorts of people joining together, people of all races, all genders, all ages, and particularly young people. I've been out there and seen so many high school and middle school students. It's really beautiful. And it is scaring the establishment shitless because they understand that, you know, as, you know, even as the rebellions or uprisings may, you know, slow down, you know, in the aftermath of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, like it often does, they understand when this economic crisis hits its peak, and if the people are actually united across all sections of the working class, the poor and dispossessed, that's going to be a problem for them. And so they're really trying to prevent this potential unity. And that is the reason why it's so important that we're engaging our people, and particularly cultural workers. People, as Claudia said, are able to move the hearts, the minds, and the bodies of people in ways that ideology and theory alone are unable to do. These aren't just artists, although we have some incredible artists that are on the Zoom tonight. These are also educators, the people's intellectuals. These are religious folks. These are people who are able to uplift the values of the working class, of collectivity, of love, of understanding the need to put people over property. These cultural workers are also people who are actively building a people's culture in order for us to grow and expand and learn, to exchange, to build, to coordinate, not only in the United States, but in the broader international working class community. And so in this moment, as we are charged to identify leaders, to develop new leaders into the movement, to develop ourselves, to be able to speak to our people about what's going on and what needs to be done. We need people who are building organization where it's needed, who are providing for our people, who are uniting and building networks of coordination and exchange, again, around the world. And so we feel like cultural work is integral to building this unity, of building the consciousness and the analysis of our people. And so again, we're so happy to be joined by you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Chantilly, a comrade, friend of mine that I met through the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. Chantilly Myers-Pickett is a musician, minister, and educator. For the past 10 years, her work has been embedded, ebbed and flowed between liturgy, ritual, anti-oppression, education, and faith-based activism. She is most passionate about the ways that we host spaces that awaken authenticity, connection, and our collective power. Leading groups to sing together is one of the many ways Chantilly practices resistance and hope. She currently works at the United Methodist Women at the Interchurch Center in New York City and leads worship in a little radical church called Common Ground. Her other full-time job is trying to raise, and I think is raising, brave and compassionate daughters with her love and life partner, John Pickett. So without further ado, Chantilly, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. This song is a song from Curtis Mayfield. It's called People Get Ready. And this is the song that just came to my spirit as I was thinking about this moment and this time of getting folks ready, of preparing ourselves, of what it means to be in the green room with other cultural workers, getting ready, encouraging each other. So I hope you enjoy this tune from Curtis Mayfield. It goes, people get ready, there's a change a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get up on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels are humming. Don't need no ticket, you just get up on board, yeah. Oh, yeah. So people get ready for the train to Jordan. We're picking up passengers from coast to coast, yeah. Faith is the key, open the doors and board them. There's room for all of the loved and lost. Oh, people get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get up on board. All you need is faith to hear these still room for the hopeless sinners whose heart on humankind just to save their own. Have pity on those whose chances are thinner, for there's no hiding place for the kingdom's throne. Oh, people, get ready, there's a train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get up on board. All you need is faith to hear diesels a humming. You don't need no ticket, you just get up on board. No, you don't need no ticket, you just get up on board. You don't need your baggage, you just get up on board. No, you don't need no hatred, you just get up on board. Yeah, we're building power, people. We're building power, people. Yeah, we're building power, people. Just get up on board. Say, we're building power, people. We're building power, people. We're building power, people. Just get up on board. Won't you sing with me? We're building power, people. Yeah. We're building power, people. Yeah. We're building power, people. Yeah. Just get up on board. Yeah. We're building power, people. Yeah. Just get up on board. All right. This is a song that I learned from a wonderful musician out in DC who was protesting and building the faith communities to get out on the streets. But from Martin Luther King, I think Martin Luther King said, you know, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And so he wrote this song. His name is Delante Golston, and I bring him into this space and thank him for this music and this song. But this is also participatory, so I may not be able to see you, but I know that you all can sing along. And the words that you just need to know are O, O, O. All right? So I'll teach you your part. And while I can't hear you, I know that you'll be singing along too. And why is it important for us to sing together? Why is it important for us to build power together? Is because our voices matter. And our voices are only stronger and louder when we sing together and protest and chant together. So it goes, oh, 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 oh. So I'll sing it, oh. Drive out the night, only light, only light. Night cannot drive out the night, only light, only light. Oh, say oh, 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 oh. Thank you, honey. Hate cannot drive out the hate, only love, only love. Hate cannot drive out, hate cannot drive out the hate, only love, only love. Sing oh, 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 oh. only peace, only peace. Wars cannot end all these wars. Only peace, only peace. One last time. Oh, 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 oh. Say oh, 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 oh. Night cannot drive out the night. Only light, only light. Sing it with me now. Night cannot drive out the night. Only light, only light. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Chantilly. Thank you so much. And give the girls kisses and hugs. Thank you. So thank you for that framing as well, Sierra, for our conversation. And thank you again, Chantilly and the baby. Kisses for that wonderful musical offering. And so, like Sierra was saying, in terms of the moments in which we're in, we're living historic times of repression, but we are most definitely also living historic times of resistance, of opportunity, of solidarity, of hope in our movements. And artists, as they always have been at the forefront of our struggles, helping us think critically of the now, but also helping us imagine radically what our future could be. And I think that that's one of the biggest strengths of the art world, of culture. And I'm not speaking only to aesthetics. I'm speaking to the very essence of the cultural work that comes from the working class, from our people, that emerges from struggle, that is the result of revolts and rebellions and uprisings throughout history. And so we're very excited about this space, about having three amazing cultural workers, educators, join us in conversation tonight. We have high respects and admirations for their work. These folks have devoted their energy and creativity to the movement, internationally, nationally. I met some of these comrades precisely in struggle and have been blessed to walk with them and learn from them. For example, Cece, I met a while back while visiting Oakland, California. And I admired her work before then. Like, I was a groupie before I actually met her, because I knew of the work that she had been doing with the collective Trust Your Struggle at that moment. And I was really impressed. Just the ways in which, the collective uplifts a lot of the spirits of our people, and puts forth ancestral wisdom in their work, And so I fell in love with the work. She's also one of the first folks that I reached out to in the process of TPF opening up, to say, we need your work in the space, and you need to do something around cultural work and ancestry and knowledge, and put it together. And it happens to be the first mural when you walk into the space. And it's a rendition of culture and its connection to ancestry. Ras, he's been with us from the get. He has been an instructor, a panelist, an artist, and he's been in the audience. He's a hellraiser and a hope giver, composer. And we're just very happy to be able to have him in the mix and have him contribute in so many ways to the development and the work that we do at TPF. And he's always down to just be present and contribute. So we're very blessed to have him. And Pablo, we had that Latin American connection in Mexico. We talked about the role and legacy of revolution, of art, in his own land, which is Chile, and the historic traditions of murals in Chile, and what it's meant to resistance. So, you know, from there on, like we've been chapping up, talking, and just building. And so we want to be able to create the space, not for, you know, just TPF to hold on to those relationships. We want those relationships to build, you know, bridges and kind of continue to reproduce more relationships and more hope across the globe. And so very excited and very happy to have you all in this space. We want to be able to give folks the opportunity to share, you know, who you are, where is your community, who is your community, what type of work have you been engaging in. And so folks are going to have, each one is going to have space to share. And so we're going to start up with Cece, and then we're going to tag someone else. So Cece.
Hi, thank you. I am so honored to be here with all this wonderful faces and people moving and shaking, especially at this very time when it's needed most. I live here in Oakland, California, but originally an indigenous Pinay that migrated here in San Francisco, but I've been here for a little while. I consider the work that I do as kind of like visual storytelling and visual translating. As Claudia had mentioned earlier, I also work with a group of artists, and we have a collective called Trust Your Struggle, who is committed and dedicated and using our skills and our tools to tell a story of our people. And as an individual artist, I mean, that's essentially also what I do. I paint faces and places of people who I've engaged with, interacted with, you know, whose faces might never be in like a Vogue cover magazine or not. And when you ask Claudia, as far as the communities that I'm part of, I mean, I definitely identify with the working class people of color communities as my main muses on the work I do, because that's what I know, and that's who I function with, and that's who feeds me and allows me to be able to do this work that I do. And so I do have a sense of accountability to be able to represent us right, you know, and our stories right, and our message right, and make us look fly in the process, you know, because I think it's important to have our story be told when no one else is telling it. And if someone else was to tell it, we never know what they're gonna say. So in my own way, this is kind of, this is my way of sharing and telling stories through murals, through paintings, you know, reclaiming public spaces to make sure that we're heard, and representing faces and people that reflects the communities that needs to be heard. So that's a bit of what I do. And I think, as both CR and Claudia had mentioned, and earlier, the part of artists, and I can speak for visual art because that's kind of the paradigm that I fit in. It's important. It's very important for us to take part in this moment. I've been with communities who speak different languages. I've been in communities who have limited skills in reading and writing, but we're able to communicate through images. And I feel like there's a power to that. There's a real power if we can see ourselves being reflected bigger than life, and know that we matter, and know our stories matter, and know that our message matters, and what we're fighting for matters. And I've seen it move other people, you know, folks who didn't know, and folks who wanted to know more, or folks who even like just wanted to be able to have a space to be involved in however form capacity they can. And I think, you know, the history of mural making that I've been taught, and the way I've known how is always been a collaborative process. You know, I'm not just telling like my thoughts and my view, but actually in full conversation and engagement of very communities I'm trying to represent. So I think that's also a very important part of my practice. I don't know, I'm sure I'm going to be answering some more questions later, but I'm also going to allow the other artists to have opportunities to introduce themselves. So thank you for allowing us to be here.
Thank you so much, Cece. We're now going to pass it over to our comrade Pablo in Chile.
¿Se escucha? ¿Me escucho? ¿Sí? Bueno, hola a todos y a todas. Bueno, mi nombre es Pablo Placencia y soy muralista de Chile, como ya mencionado anteriormente Claudia. Voy a hacer todo el esfuerzo por hablar lento, ¿eh? Porque para los que me conocen saben que hablo demasiado rápido, porque bueno, porque soy chileno y en Chile hablamos de esa manera. Y así que voy a hablar lento para que no sea tan difícil la traducción, ¿ok? Bueno, como les mencionaba, soy muralista. Empecé con este oficio más o menos en el año 2008, que fue justo el mismo año que entré a la universidad. Pero ya conocía gente que pintaba acá en mi ciudad, que es Talcahuano, que es una ciudad puerto, que está ubicada más o menos como a 600 kilómetros hacia el sur de la capital, que es Santiago. Siempre lo recalco porque las veces que he estado en otros países, por ejemplo, inmediatamente me preguntan si soy de Santiago y yo digo que no soy de Santiago, ni siquiera soy de la capital de acá de la región que es Concepción, sino que soy de esta ciudad que es Talcahuano y bueno, bajo este mismo contexto que es una comuna bastante pobre, es que me impregno de todos estos factores para comenzar a pintar. Acá en mi ciudad surge una brigada muralista llamada UNLEM, y yo también formé parte de esa brigada muralista, y ahí es donde me formé. Siempre recalco este tema de la formación porque, bueno, para los que no saben, nosotros acá en Chile tenemos una tradición muralista que se viene plasmando en las calles desde los 60 más o menos. Nosotros somos herederos de esa tradición y básicamente la gente que pinta en la calle no es gente que tenga estudios académicos, sino que es gente con compromiso social, gente militante del pueblo que decide agarrar las brochas para plasmar un mensaje. Y nosotros, 50 años después, seguimos haciendo lo mismo, básicamente utilizando de hecho la misma técnica y transmitiendo el mismo mensaje social. Yo ahora formo parte de un colectivo que levantamos junto a otros compañeros más que se llama Pinta y Lucha, ¿ya? Y venimos trabajando más o menos ya hace un año y estamos como a puertas de dar un paso que es la formación de una cooperativa gráfica. De hecho, ahora en este momento estoy en mi casa, en una pieza que es un taller que estamos armando como taller de serigrafía o estampado, donde también pretendemos poder desarrollar propaganda política a través de la gráfica, que no solo pretendemos desarrollarla en los muros, sino que también traspasarla a otro soporte. Y no sé qué más les puedo agregar. Bueno, para mí el muralismo ha sido como mi pasaporte, por decirlo de una manera, para llegar a lugares que de otra manera es imposible haber llegado. Imposible conocer, por ejemplo, varias ciudades de Chile, o incluso imposible que haya llegado a México, que es donde tuve la oportunidad de conocer a Claudia. Si no existiera el muralismo, si me hubiese dedicado a este oficio, yo creo que difícilmente se me hubiesen abierto las puertas para poder conocer otras culturas, otras realidades. Y bueno, todo ese bagaje es el que me ha hecho como sacando ideas de por acá, de por allá, y es lo que hoy en día soy, que soy, bueno, muralista, principalmente trabajador de la cultura. No me gusta mucho denominarme artista, siento que los artistas están un poco alejados del pueblo. Me gusta más llamarme trabajador de la cultura porque me considero parte de este pueblo y como les mencionaba anteriormente, también heredero de esta tradición muralista chilena que no me pertenece ni a mí ni a mi colectivo, sino que le pertenece al pueblo en su conjunto. Eso. Así que, y muchas gracias por la invitación, agradezco mucho que se generen estas oportunidades de que, no sé, me interesa mucho poder mostrar lo que estamos haciendo acá en esta pequeña ciudad que es Talcahuano y que se está haciendo conocida como en otros lugares del mundo. Es decir, eso, muchas gracias por la invitación, Claudia.
Gracias, Pablo. Blah.
Blah.
Blah. Raz, let's share a little bit about yourself, brother.
Yeah, thanks to you and the People's Forum for everything you've been doing, keeping things going. It's much appreciated, especially now, you know. Yeah, I'm glad to be with these other great artists and well aware of your work, so it's an honor for me. It's pretty much the same for me in that I believe in any artistic idiom as functional to what's happening around us. And as with any artistic art form, the narrative about its use can be appropriated by a sector of people who believe that somehow there's no connection, quote unquote, to what's happening around us. And being a jazz musician, and my father and my grandfather played as well. But that particular idiom, especially starting in the 80s, seems to have been the recipient of that narrative the most. And, you know, I was kind of raised by the people in the community who were very much engaged in trying to make change. And music, not just jazz, but that was one of the musical idioms that was involved in the consciousness raising of that time. And, you know, my own family, I grew up with, you know, they had a love of multiple kinds of music and art forms because, you know, there's not really that much separation between them. But increasingly being involved in education, even aside from being a jazz musician, your own personal learning experience, what that's made of, it becomes clearer and clearer that it's very reciprocal. The quote unquote educational process is the embodiment of that dialectic, and that you're learning and whatever you're accumulating as you go and learn and passing that on, it's always reciprocal. And that can be overtly applied to the various kinds of struggles going on and that has been going on. And I found it very important, especially in this idiom, the jazz idiom, the one that I play the most, to reiterate and reinforce the idea that it's not just music. I mean, you know, it's not a contradiction for an art to be enjoyed for what it is. It doesn't make you any less engaged. But to say that there is no social or political connection, that's just the people who have been running the show, unfortunately, rely on that kind of narrative. And they rely on people believing that. And so, you know, I've been very much engaged in utilizing what I do to counteract that. And it's not a new struggle. It's a continuation of the learning experience I absorbed hanging around with a lot of elders in the community. And my own father, who was a saxophonist and jazz musician and very much politically engaged. And, you know, a lot of the things that he said to me, you might understand it intellectually on the surface level, but it really opens up more and more. And I'm sure that's everybody's story. And you know, that's not a unique situation at all. You know, we all have that in common. that we were set in motion by the environmental factors around us and the people around us in our respective families who were setting the foundation for what we do. And a sub issue to the issue is that the kind of music I play has been termed avant-garde, and historically, that has been that particular sector of any kind of art form has been associated with a certain class that has the immediate means to support art, and that's another false narrative. It's like attributing the creation of art to just one grouping of people, and which goes into another issue, which is the terminologies that are put on to what we do. But I always prefer the term people's music, you know. I'm like a child of the Black arts, people's arts. I mean, it's called Black arts, but it applies to everybody fighting for freedom, fighting against these words that were put on to what we do, you know, because it can't be contained that way, especially with a slang word. You know, I'm not picky with its use, you know, but overall, I prefer the term people's music, and that's what it is. You know, it is a folk music as well, you know, even though it doesn't have words, but it can have words. Jazz is a music that can function with the use of words as a topical focus, and also people can relate to what's happening with the music just from the feeling it gives you as well. It can motivate you even if there's no words in the music. I can attest to that. So, and I'm very appreciative to the People's Forum for what you've been doing and synthesizing all these elements, all these components that make up education, you know, which can only have a positive effect as far as reaching people, you know, to generate some, you know, the activity, that positive activity needs to be generated.
Thank you so much, Ras. Claudia talks about you all the time, and we just really appreciate how just all the different ways you've offered to the People's Forum, nourishing our hearts and minds. My grandfather was actually a jazz musician. He played the trumpet, and so I'm definitely a fan. We're gonna keep on with you, and you know, as we were saying earlier, we've been experiencing some very difficult months as an international community. We've seen the lack of response and negligence from the state and neoliberal governments in relation to this global health crisis. In the midst of a global pandemic, we are currently experiencing a people's uprising in the United States. And we also saw months of uprising, popular uprising in Chile that started in October last year. Can you talk about how you know, your communities have responded to this moment, and if you could speak specifically about, you know, what you've seen as response of, you know, from cultural workers and artists in this moment of crisis and uprising, and yeah, just feel free to share your experiences and the way that you're organizing in this moment.
Yeah, I won't make it too long. I've seen artists, I've been witnessing artists, some as individuals that might have been in need of a greater consciousness about what's happening around us, have their political awareness developed by the very circumstances themselves. And that's an interesting thing to witness. And that's on one level. And as was stated earlier, the activity that's happening is very inspiring in reference to the amount of young people in particular that have been out there mobilizing seriously. And that provides a learning experience and the educational dynamic in itself with people who create art, you know, and that lack of complacency, even if you had a consciousness already, you know, you never stop learning and it just continues based on people putting their bodies out there physically, being vocal about the injustice going on. And that learning process is very reciprocal that way. And the impact, there's been music being used for a lot of the outdoor activity and outdoor demonstrations that's been happening. And the sense of motivation that can be set in motion through the use of music, all kinds of music, is very important. And it's not just a small role, you know. It's important for keeping up the endurance, for keeping up the positivity and the optimism that's necessary for facing the things we have to face, and how entrenched it is, and how the things that we raise hell about are so sanctioned from the top, and the frustration that could come from the fact that these people that do these things, they hide, you know. But you know, that's but you know, the people are very vocal and coming out in huge numbers, and it's been reassuring to see music, a return of music accompanying that activity, and especially jazz, you know, because I was coming of age in the early 80s, and not that consciousness never stops, but there was a slight lull, and the narrative of the music started to go in another direction from what I remember, in reference to the elders that I was around, and people very much engaged in struggle. But you know, as in all negative changes, that reverses. You know, eventually the masses get repulsed by things that are not constructive. If they've read books, if they haven't read a lot of books, that means nothing. You know, it's important to build up knowledge and all of that, but the knowledge is in the very lives of people, and all those people taking public transportation every day, risking their lives, keeping these stores open that we can go in and out of and stuff like that. We can't forget that. So as long as I've been involved with the jazz idiom as a political force, it's just being elevated even more from the activity and the motivation of the people out there, you know, fighting against everything that, you know, I don't have to tell you because it's pretty rampant, you know. And so in spite of that frustration, you know, seeing the people out there, I can't express how reassuring it is that people are not being complacent, and people in a multinational way too, interculturally, multiculturally, and all those dynamics at once, which is important, you know, because it comes down to multinational unity at the end of the day. Not every nationhood concept among people of color is there's a reactionary component, and then there's a component of it that is a natural consequence of being treated a certain way amongst people that are concentrated amongst themselves in a certain area. But of course, the ultimate process is to keep it moving and recognizing the similarities between people in their struggle, because that's really what's going to push it through. You know, the cultural pride, and then recognizing that it has to be a multinational thrust at the same time, and it doesn't decrease who you are culturally. You know.
Thank you, Ras. So
Thank
we're gonna
you.
shoot it. We're gonna shoot it up for Cece to respond. How has their communities that you are a part of responded to the uprisings, to the crisis, and you know, how has your work kind of connected to that in this moment?
Prior to the mass mobilization and uprising that's been going on, I've actually just been in conversation with individual artists and businesses here in Oakland and San Francisco and the Bay Area, because those are the communities that also I function with, and just knowing how hard our people got hit by this pandemic, not having an option to work, or, you know, if they do work, they're putting health at risk, because I think there's also a direct connection and recognizing that it's our people who was in the front line when it became to the frontline workers that is allowing our society to function while everyone else kind of had the opportunity to stay home. And so I've been in conversation with many folks, friends and families, and, you know, folks, because they've been closed for a long time, and a good portion of their storefronts are windows and glass, and people started to board up their businesses in fear of, like, no one's going to be there, you know, things might, like, because there's no one there consistently there, you know, who might happen. So we start boarding up and walking around in San Francisco and Oakland. I was also doing work as a disaster worker for San Francisco, meaning kind of like folks who are analyzing kind of what is happening and the support that the city needs in order for us to deal with this current health crisis. And within that, I was, you know, while everyone has been advised to stay home, I'm actually out in the city looking at how things are kind of changed, whether it's the amount of traffic that have lessened, which was amazing, but it's also obviously the business being closed down. And it looked really grim, just in terms of, you know, the spots that we used to hang out, and the spots that we used to go to and eat to, the places that, you know, where we're supporting our folks are no longer in function, and it's all boarded up. And it looked like, I mean, it was just very melancholy and grim and ghost town in so many spaces. So was able to chop it up with folks and just, you know, kind of also apply what we know how to do, is we know how to paint. So what would it look like if we added some colors and lines and added the stories of what is it that we're hoping for? What is it that we're wishing, given the time that we're in, and just offering kind of a vision in a time where even imagining is difficult, because everything was uncertain. No one knew the timeline when we were going to reopen. No one knew what was going to happen when we do reopen. You know, no one has been given a rent bailout. Everyone's going to be in debt. Everyone's already in debt, and they're not making money in order to even, like, figure out this debt they're currently going to have to pay for that. So for the very least, you know, with what we know how, we're like, what if we paint them up, you know, and kind of like allow ourselves to be able to imagine something else different. And you know, I've been getting so much love, and people are like, you know, your work has been so inspiring, and it's been amazing to see kind of like healing images for us to continue with what's going on. And I'm loving all of that, but also essentially, and it's also what's feeding me to be able to do this, to be able to actually be out and help kind of really envision what a just recovery can look like for us, and start talking to people like, you know, what does that even look like? And I know that we have been so widely ignored by institutions in the system, as far as like being able to provide us economic and even health support during this time. But what I have noticed, though, is just the resiliency and the kind of this almost underground clandestine economy, especially with an undocumented family, and how to go about. I mean, they've been doing this, you know, they've been figuring out ways how to sustain and survive in this system and still be under the radar. So in so many ways, I've learned so much just being in conversation with folks, and that allowed me to kind of figure out what can we envision right now to allow us to have some sort of light at the end of that tunnel to look forward to, because even that became difficult at a certain point in time. And then, you know, the uprising came. And I think folks had just been so cooped up for so long, and been so frustrated and angry and in fear that it was almost inevitable for it to happen. You know, like all this violence to our community, and it's not new. It's been happening ongoing, but because of the pandemic and because of the violent murder that's been happening to Black communities, I think the uprising was to have been expected, and to the intensity in which we're witnessing it now, and to the influence that it has in different parts of the world. I mean, it's in so many ways, it's really inspiring, and I like the word that Claudia had used. Like, it is a very potent opportunity for us to be out there, and to raise our voice, to raise our fist, but also to raise our consciousness of what happens after all of this. And I think why the murals on the plywood right now, though they're not permanent, you know, once the protest fades out, the imagery are still left behind that people could go and see after the protest is over. And wanting to offer imagery beyond the anger, and beyond, although that's all part of it, but just really the resilience and the hope and the dreams that our people want, and why we're out there protesting in the first place. So, and it's amazing and it's great that folks been moved and been inspired by the work. We like took over all over downtown. I mean, I'm not saying like me and my collective, but there's like hundreds of artists that, I mean, it looks like an outdoor political gallery if you was to walk over there at this very moment right now. You know, businesses themselves, who we've developed and cultivated relationships, have asked us to come and, like, you know, at this time that we are boarded up, if you can help us kind of figure out like imagery that would reflect where we're at and what we're trying to do and to partake, and that we are we want to show the public, and we want to show all that we, you know, we are in support of everything that's going on. So it's been great to be kind of like a navigator and mediator in those components with both the businesses and the public, and also to be able to be in conversations with folks and helping me really visualize, you know, I mean, though we've been fighting this for so long, I mean, at this moment in time, it feels a little different, and it smells a little different, and it looks a little different, and it's just a great time to kind of keep having those conversations with folks, because it's essentially how we build and how we cultivate and how we organize. And if we have kind of a similar vision, or at the very least a similar goal, I think it's so much easier to figure out alternative system that's not dependent on our institution right now to feed us, because we've been feeding us for so long. But what does that really look like if we can make that happen, so we don't have to be dependent on the very people who's not looking out for us, you know? on the very systems and institutions who ignores us. And I've seen so much amazing work on the ground as far as mutual aids, as far as folks just really extending each other. You know, we can't hug and there's this social distance and all these things, but people are still really connecting, and it's beautiful to see, you know? So I'm very much excited to keep continuing this work and to really enact the visions that I've heard people say and that we're already starting to do, and in the very little kind of, and the contribution which we know how to do in our offerings is at least creating images that reflects that, you know, that reflects the thoughts, the stories, and the visions and the dreams that we have, and knowing that we're gonna get through this.
Thank you so much, Cece. Thank you, Ras. I mean, again, the hopefulness, right, that comes with being able to imagine the radical shift that we can make as a society when we come together in solidarity. And so thank you for that offering. So I wanted to kick it to Pablo, but before I kick it to Pablo, I just want to say, like, we're experiencing kind of the reverse of what happened in Chile. Like, there was an uprising and then there was a global pandemic. And so we know, like, from a lot of the conversations we've been having and a lot of the consciousness that has been deepening in our communities, that people have been able to say, you know, the pandemic is capitalism. Like, we know that's clear enough. That's the global pandemic. Capitalism, neoliberalism, all these oppressive and exploitative systems, that's the pandemic. We're in the middle of a health crisis, right? Chile responded to neoliberal policies. So like the neoliberal project. And there was a uprising that kind of was, I don't want to say started, because it didn't start. It kind of like just exploded in October last year. And then the pandemic hit this year. And so I'm just wondering how did things shift in the work that artists and culture workers were doing during the uprising, and now that they've kind of gone into, you know, this health crisis, and also thinking a little bit about even criminalization, right? Like the level of repression in the streets, the police presence. You know, we had it, you know, as soon as it was like, there's a global pandemic, there started being like the criminalization, like even more intensified in our communities, by police who would attack folks for not wearing masks to go into businesses. And these were poor folks that were actually trying to get to work that couldn't possibly even find masks or purchase masks, right? And so I'm wondering, how is the situation out there, and like what are some of the shifts in the work that artists and cultural workers were doing in the uprising, and what are they doing now?
Bueno, como mencionabas tú, Claudia, acá en Chile ocurrió todo al revés. Primero vino el estallido social de octubre y ahora estamos viendo esta etapa de pandemia. Me quiero referir un poco a lo que fue el estallido de octubre, que nosotros igual como colectivo siempre intentamos dar distintos tipos de discusiones. Y hemos estado igual reflexionando bastante en torno a lo que pasó en octubre acá en Chile, y fue algo totalmente inesperado. Yo creo que nadie se esperaba que pasara lo que pasó, que llegara a tal nivel de masividad, y sobre todo que haya ocurrido un despertar de la conciencia de los chilenos y las chilenas. Nosotros veíamos un pueblo dormido, pensábamos que esto quizás ni siquiera lo íbamos a vivir nosotros, pero nosotros siempre seguíamos bajo la idea de seguir movilizándonos, seguir organizándonos, porque era en realidad lo que nos mueve a nosotros esto. Entonces cuando pasó esto fue como, nos pilló a todos muy de sorpresa, y bueno, igual supimos responder de buena manera, que es haciendo lo que más nos gusta hacer a nosotros, que es pintar en las calles. Y así fue como durante octubre, más o menos hasta febrero, estuvimos muy metidos en el tema de la propaganda en las calles, transmitiendo mensajes, escribiendo consignas en relación a lo que tenía que ver con el estallido social y con este despertar de de las conciencias que yo te mencionaba. Una de las cosas también que nos llamaba mucho la atención fue como este clic que hicieron las personas que para nosotros que somos militantes de izquierda, son como, ya hay muchas cosas que ya las tenemos como asumidas, pero el común de la gente, por llamarlo de una manera, el pueblo no las tenía asumidas y fue como este clic que hizo que se dieron cuenta de que había algo que estaba funcionando mal, que es el sistema neoliberal, que si yo estuve escuchando, era muy atento a lo que mencionaban la compañera y el compañero, y efectivamente los pobres somos pobres en todos lados del mundo y el enemigo es uno solo, que nos azota, yo creo que de la misma manera, los mismos instrumentos, y a pesar de eso nosotros igual seguimos en la calle pintando. Muchos de nuestros murales que fueron pintados desde octubre, dije, hasta más o menos febrero, fueron manchados por parte de grupos fascistas de acá de Chile que han estado surgiendo y que están en contra de todo este estallido. Eso como primera parte. Ahora, hablando un poco de lo que ha sido el tema de marzo en adelante, que cambió toda la realidad del país por la llegada de la pandemia, para nosotros los que trabajamos en cultura ha sido bien complejo por el hecho de que, bueno, acá en Chile la cultura está como, yo creo, no sé, en tercer, cuarto, quinto lugar de las prioridades del gobierno. Recordad que nosotros somos el experimento neoliberal en el mundo y el cual se desarrolló a cabo a punta de represión, violencia y efectivamente hoy en día acá en Chile estamos viviendo las consecuencias de esto, un sistema de salud bastante empobrecido. Todos los días nos despertamos acá y cada día los niveles de contagio son mayores. El gobierno no ha sabido dar respuesta a lo que necesitamos realmente, que es poder quedarnos en nuestras casas, pero quedarnos en nuestras casas también sabiendo de que no tenemos, o sea, no tenemos que salir a buscar el alimento, por ejemplo. El gobierno no se ha podido hacer cargo de eso, no ha querido hacerse cargo de eso, mejor dicho. Entonces nosotros con los que trabajamos en cultura estamos totalmente desvalidos. Una de las cosas buenas que ha sucedido este tiempo es, bueno, y desde octubre en adelante, es este despertar de las conciencias que ha ayudado a que nosotros acá en las comunidades nos comencemos a organizar. Y ha surgido también la idea de que es parte, yo creo que es parte de la cultura popular chilena, que son las ollas comunes, que como nosotros nos organizamos con los demás vecinos y las vecinas para poder ponerle, o sea, para poder comer básicamente, para poder alimentarnos. Y otra de las cosas que nosotros como colectivo estamos haciendo es intentar autogestionar nuestro trabajo. Como yo les mencionaba anteriormente, el tema de la cultura acá en Chile en particular está como muy dejado de lado. Entonces, los que trabajamos en esto, principalmente trabajamos como con fondos estatales, que son proyectos que se van generando cada semestre o cada un año. Y como estamos viviendo este periodo de pandemia, esto se ha complicado. Entonces nosotros ahora estamos volviendo nuevamente a trabajar de manera muy autogestionada. A pesar de que estamos con todo este riesgo sanitario, no hemos abandonado las calles. De hecho, hemos estado pintando hasta por lo menos hace 2 semanas atrás, que fue el último mural que pintamos, dándole muy fuerte con la demanda que queremos levantar, que es el aprobar una nueva constitución, que sea una constitución hecha desde abajo hacia arriba y que nos favorezca a nosotros, a los pobres. Y hemos estado muy metidos con esa demanda del apruebo. Claramente para salir a pintar tomamos todas las precauciones, no no ser un grupo en realidad salimos por lo general 3, 4 personas a pintar, intentamos tomar todas las precauciones y ahora se nos viene la parte más pesada que es el invierno. Acá aún todavía no llega el invierno, ya el fin de semana comienza y ya se empieza a sentir un frío terrible. De hecho, acá en este momento hace mucho frío y yo creo que ahora vamos definitivamente por las lluvias, vamos a parar un poco con este trabajo, pero vamos a buscar otras maneras de seguir agitando como siempre lo hemos hecho. No sé si quedó bien, más o menos claro cómo fue que surgió todo esto, porque como mencionaba Claudia anteriormente, surge al revés de cómo está pasando allá en Estados Unidos. Acá primero surge esto y después nos pillamos con lo de la pandemia.
That was great. No, that was great. It was perfect. And I think it's important to note also that it's very important to note that we didn't think that an uprising would happen anytime soon either here in the United States. And it's important to note that there were several killings before George Floyd was killed. So, you know, it triggered something in the consciousness of people, and yet it wasn't something that people expected. We should have expected it, but we didn't expect the scale and the speediness in which these protests turned into an uprising. And it's kind of similar in the way, because if I would have asked any comrades from Chile probably a year ago, you know, way before October, is this going to happen? They would have said no. People are too dormant. People are too, you know, complacent. And the reality is that, you know, people's objective reality, people's concrete conditions are exactly what set the stage for these types of uprising, even if we think that it's impossible for it to happen. So it was great for you to share that with us, Pablo. I wanted to just, you know, for the sake of time, there are questions that are coming up in the chat, but there's a question specifically for Cece that I think Sierra has. So I'm just gonna kick it off to Sierra.
Thanks. And thank you, Pablo. It was so inspiring to witness the uprisings in Chile. Yeah, y'all were popping. Cece, you are a muralist as well, and a lot of your work is grounded on ancestral wisdom and community. You have been taking to the streets with other artists, doing mutual aid work, and also blessing the walls with your amazing art. What has being in a collective process and creating art in the current moment, how is that looking? Like, how does that feel? Thinking about the murals and the mutual aid work you've been involved in, have folks struggled through and decided, you know, collectively which stories to uplift, you know, which concepts that you're using, you know, if so, like, what has the focus been and why?
So I paint both with my collective and also as an individual, honestly, whenever I can. I mean, I still am balancing like work and like pretty much when that's done, like I have my sweater to put on and I'm out in the street. So as far as our collective discussions, I mean, you know, I'll speak for me. I mean, I'm painting things that is in reflection of the people that I'm in conversation with. So, and as a collective, I know we've had this conversation of really, and different people have a different, you know, even as a collective, we don't necessarily always share the same perspective. Like there's some folks that are out there really, it's about targeting the institution that have caused like this crazy failure of support for our peoples and wanting to focus their energy on that. I think for me, I'm more interested in focusing the imagery with the folks, with the stories and the folks in the communities that I'm functioning with, doing the work, ensuring that we are all being fed at this time and that we're all surviving. And even though some folks can't pay rent at the moment, that everyone, or, you know, folks have the opportunity to figure out how we can really help each other. So that's a little bit more and the businesses that I've been talking to. So I'm kind of in conversation with them and reflecting, you know, figuring out imagery and symbolisms to reflect their stories, as well as really having in the back of my mind, like, what does a just recovery look like at this current time? Like, what can we envision for us to look forward to, but also for us to intentionally do the work so that we can get there. And I think the part that I'm doing is just a part of the bigger work that the community is doing, you know? And sometimes it hit right. And there's moments where I'm like, and just like the work that we're doing on the ground organizing, there's some stuff I'm like, okay, we might need to think about this a little bit more, you know, because I think there's definitely instances where we're being kind of reactionary on what's happening and what's going on, that there's not a lot of time allotted to like figuring out a full-on strategy. And I think the trick right now is balancing both and being able to respond urgently and immediately, but also with a bigger vision of like, we are doing this because of this long-term vision that we have for our communities. So I don't know if my practice actually really changed that much, aside from the fact that I might have to paint faster and more right now because there's so much more demand in terms of like both the businesses, but also just organizing folks wanting an imagery to represent the work that they're doing. And as a visual translator, I feel like there's definitely a lot of that of requests that's been going down my way. And you know, and inspired by the stuff that Pablo has shared with us, and because there's so many of us, we're able to actually, I'm not out on the street every day, you know, like I'm there, I'm out, I'm painting when I can, but I also like have fortunate enough to be home, and whether it's like sharing my work digitally in order to like expand the reach and expand you know, being tactical about the technology and the tools that we have in our hands right now, and like, and who has the skills to be able to navigate in all those different worlds. And when I'm needed on the street, then I'm out on the streets, like we're, and because there are other people who can, like, I feel like we also have to be strategic in like all the different platforms in which we're trying to get the message out. Unfortunately, not because of the collective that I'm part of, but also other artists who's just out there like, yo, I'm down. How can I be down? I'm like, I don't know, let's figure it out. And still kind of like through this process, learning a bunch of different lessons along the way on how to create work that reflects our resistance or resilience, but also how to offer hope and heal and inspire so that folks can be motivated to continue this, because it's tiring to be out on the street every day. And I relate to Pablo. I mean, fortunately, the Bay Area has better weather than, you know, New York and Chile, but like just being out there, I mean, it's a lot of both physical, spiritual, emotional labor to put it out there, then having to watch your back and all those different things. But I think for me is kind of really like maximizing and utilizing all of the different tools that we have so that the message gets sustained and the message doesn't get lost, and that we can expand our reach to pull more people to be in our end, to ensure that, you know, the change that we want to see happens, and a massive like mobilization as we can influence that.
Thank you so much. And I think that that's a perfect segue for the question, that the next question. I mean, I think, you know, we've talked about history teaching us that heavy and difficult crises and moments of uprising are messy, are confusing, but they're also spaces for opportunity and for, you know, there's a task of revolutionaries and people that are meaning to do and are committed to do the work to build a new society, to seize the moment. Like there needs to be, you know, the commitment and the clarity to be able to seize the moment in a way that takes us to the next step of a revolutionary process, even way more stronger, right? And so we're wondering, what are your thoughts in terms of like art and culture work as part of a larger political project? Like we live in a society that is money driven. We live in a society that promotes individualism, that says, you know, artists are sensitive about their shit, so you can't even argue with them, right? And we're saying that that's not necessarily the case. We're saying that the type of work that you all produce, that you all create, you do collaboratively, you do collectively, and you do that because there's a larger political project. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about that? What's the role of cultural workers? What are the roles of collectives and organizations and cooperatives of artists? Like, why do we need them?
I'm sorry, I've talked a lot, but I just wanted to answer that quickly, as quickly as I can, because I feel like that's always been my practice. So I don't know anything different, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I could see why people kind of distinguish, even in the contemporary art world, which sometimes I can get my feet into because, you know, political art became trendy at some point in time. And now being shown in museum and galleries, and I do have access to some of those spaces and places, which is always an interesting kind of engagement. But I also, you know, my heritage is from the Philippines, and within the political organizing folks in the Philippines, cultural work is embedded in all those different sectors. Whether you're working for women's rights, LGBT rights, whether you're working for, you know, to abolish the prison industrial complex, whatever like work the organizing platform does, they always have had a cultural work embedded within those sectors because they realize and acknowledge the importance and the relevance of how culture can change people's consciousness. Because essentially all this work that we're doing as organizers in this political realm, I mean, we're trying to change culture. We're trying to change value and consciousness of the very folks who have been oppressing us, along with folks who are just not, who's in hegemony and it's not even like, or too privileged to even think of our struggles, you know, and trying to put light and trying to have them, have our stories be reflected for them to see and for them to be able to take part in, and also for our own people, you know, because there's so much distractions out in the world with capitalism that we're dealing with, you know. I think for me, and why I wanted to kind of answer so immediately, I think it's kind of important to have the conversation of like, if we can really kind of start changing our own consciousness within our folks to like not ask the question of how culture and art is important, but rather it's just like, is to actually accept and acknowledge that it should be together and it should be put together as far as like whether it's educating the folks out on the street or whether it's educating the folks in academia or whether it's like out there singing a song in a concert or a small community venue. I do believe that the marriage of art culture within a political revolution with a political resistance, I mean, as far as I've known the history of like, even in this nation of what I've been taught, I've always seen that also happen, maybe not acknowledged and not said in that way. But I mean, you know, the whole idea of the artist makes the revolution irresistible is so real. And I think that we have the power and the tools and the skills and the motivation and the commitment and the dedication of folks out there who want to partake in that.
Yeah, I agree with what Cece just said about that, especially in reference to relating to the community and the artists. One of the roles of the artists in a revolutionary way is filling in that gap. And there's so many ways that you can do that with whatever artistic discipline you're dealing with. For example, Asada talked numerous times about why the Black Panthers set so much in motion through actual example. But as will happen, certain components, you have to retain the community connection and not feel that you are outside of that. Because whatever consciousness raising happens, or whatever kind of consciousness develops, like I said before, it's reciprocal. So that contact has to remain. And sometimes there were other formations that formed that felt that they had to relate even stronger to working people, the people that actually keep things together in the community, that not everything was top down, and I'm saying this as somebody from a generation after that. So, but I'm saying that based on, the dialectic is you can learn from things in hindsight, but still, the people who preceded you might know how to analyze that better. So I'm trying to find the right words for that. But it seems like based on what those of us, everybody here in this conversation, the things that we can deduct as far as what happened, whatever kind of foul play was happening from on top, be it COINTELPRO or whatever, one of the objectives was to sever the community connection, community programs, looking down on that as somehow not being connected to whatever other necessary functions needed to happen. And I say all that to say that as a jazz musician, I feel that was always my role also. That's always how I was inclined, having a lot to do with the kind of environmental factors. I grew up from the Black Arts movement, and not so much about emulation of individual personalities, but the premise of what you're doing, and maintaining that connection. Because I learned about the music and the art form I do from the people around me. That's why it's important for me to be involved with an entity like People's Forum and other entities like that, because I sort of watch the attempt to unravel that. And if we have something that is concretely organized and formed to synthesize political work, artistic work, and cultural work, that's not a small thing. Because when the conversation comes up about quote unquote what went wrong in the struggle, et cetera, one of those things was the attempt to sever those everyday connections to the people. So, I have a tendency to view the vanguard dynamic along the lines of a collectivity, while respecting the educational role, respecting what you can learn from people, respecting people that know more than you, and how, because I still consider myself to be a student. I'm increasingly involved more in education, just based on accumulating knowledge, whatever that's supposed to be. But it's always parallel with always learning. The people in our communities. The educational process is reciprocal, and it's a circular process that we're all feeding each other. And I've been, on a technical basis, I've been noticing the impact that the music has been having in making people probe more, investigate more, read more, and learn more. My personal conversations with people and the things that they say. I heard you play and it made me want to read this book. And I'm aware of myself as a cultural worker, but that you learn when people say that, because you might not know that that's happening. You're aware of the fact that that is a function. Because it happened with me. being younger and being inspired by jazz musicians who said, no, we're not separate from the movement. We're not separate from the struggle. You know, that's that other stuff, you know. But and that it's a continuous reverberation. That person reads and then they accumulate knowledge. They pass it on, and then the next person passes it on. And that's what we want. That's how things have to progress through that chain reaction. People who have read a lot, people who have not, as I said before, these are all false conflicts, you know. But and the role of art can do that. And it's been a struggle for me in the jazz world because, like I said, I know I might be repeating this, but there was a false narrative that began to seep into what we do, saying that, oh, it's just about music and, you know, we're not involved with quote unquote that stuff, you know. But it's not a false dichotomy to participate in art and enjoy the art, but then it's not, you know, if people are losing their lives at the hands of racist violence and it's sanctioned by the state, and the people perpetuating the violence can harm even women and children and walk out of these courtrooms across the country, they have a support system of people that enable it. And when they're engaging in racist violence, they're thinking in their mind that, you know, well, I can do this because I have a support system. But, you know, I'm saying that to the choir here. But I just use that as for the larger example, saying that that same dynamic can exist with what we do to create positive change, especially with young people, to say, you know, that's not how you solve dilemmas with each other. You speak to each other, you communicate, you know, you don't use that kind of methodology to relate to each other if it's going to harm each other, because it only makes certain negative factors stronger. And the positivity that's contained in art that we create, be it jazz, any musical idiom, painting, poetry, writing, teaching. I mean, you know, people are artists. You know, life is an art. When you're living life, you're an artist. When you're navigating art, when you're a parent, you're an artist. It's not an elitist concept. It's the same as being a jazz musician. If you have to negotiate life, if you have to negotiate dealing with other human beings, if your life is based on making sure another human being is okay, that's jazz in itself. You know, jazz is just like a very generic term for something that we are all doing in our various ways. You know, that is what we're all doing in our everyday lives. And I didn't mean that in a necessarily abstract kind of way, but I'm trying to find the words to say that it's all connected. You know, it could it's a positive reverberation when you apply whatever you know or what you're still knowing, and related to the people around you, and not along elitist lines or you know, I'm the vanguard and you're not, you know. But I mean, it is true that there can be a sector of people that might need to realize that they might need to learn from somebody that might be more learned in a certain topic, as far as the educational process in any way goes. But I think we're all saying in this conversation that it's a collectivity, and that whole process of how we learn from each other is a constant give and take, or give and give, you know.
Thank you so much, Ras, for that. I just wanted to invite Pablo to share his reflections.
Yeah.
Bueno, lo que quería rescatar de las palabras del compañero Ras es que nosotros, por ejemplo, acá nosotros como trabajadores de la cultura, como colectivo, nos posicionamos dentro de una vereda que a nosotros nos permite mostrar nuestro trabajo, que es parte de nuestra cultura popular. Bueno, como anécdota también aprovecho de contar de que cuando he tenido la oportunidad de conversar con compañeros y compañeras de otros países, por lo general es muy poco lo que se sabe de la cultura de Chile, y es más que nada porque tuvimos 17 años de dictadura, luego el periodo de transición, de pseudo-transición a la democracia, que fue la implementación del neoliberalismo, que de cierta manera fue acallando nuestra propia cultura popular. Nosotros somos herederos de esta cultura popular y lo que hacemos es posicionarnos en esta vereda para combatir contra la cultura hegemónica. Y así de que nosotros ocupamos esta herramienta del muralismo que mencionaba anteriormente, que surge en un periodo muy convulsionado acá en el país, que es la década de los 60, donde había una gran cantidad de movimientos sociales. Bueno, recordar también el año 59, con la Revolución Cubana, se inicia todo un proceso en todo el continente y Chile tampoco queda atrás en ese sentido. Pues, y acá en Chile hubo gran cantidad de, por ejemplo, industria cultural, no solo dentro de lo que es el muralismo, sino que, por ejemplo, dentro del cine, del teatro, de la música sobre todo. Nosotros como herederos de esta cultura popular es que no concebimos otra manera de hacer arte. Por ejemplo, nosotros no podríamos estar pintando cualquier cosa porque no nos nace. Yo, por ejemplo, de manera personal, entré a la universidad a estudiar arte en particular porque lo que me gustaba era poder expresar lo que yo veía en la calle, en el cotidiano. Y también porque dentro del entorno del que vengo, esto todas estas como demandas sociales están ahí, se ven plasmadas. Entonces, dentro de esta vereda de como defensores de esta cultura popular, nosotros no concebimos otra forma de hacer arte. Para nosotros el arte lo que hacemos nosotros es político por el hecho de que, bueno, para empezar, nuestro mensaje es el reflejo de lo que nosotros vemos, y no solo de lo que nosotros vemos también, porque nosotros nos vinculamos directamente con las comunidades, somos parte de las comunidades. Nosotros no venimos, por ejemplo, muchas veces como pasa que vienen artistas, así como artistas de otros lados, a plasmar lo que ellos piensan que es la realidad de un lugar. Nosotros vivimos la realidad de los lugares, nosotros nos organizamos junto con las comunidades. Y el hecho de plasmar estos mensajes en los muros es uno de los puntos de por qué lo que hacemos nosotros es político. Otro hecho también es el hecho de que yo por ejemplo, nunca pinto solo un mural, es imposible. Nosotros nos encanta, por ejemplo, poder vincularnos con las comunidades porque creemos que el proceso de creación colectiva de este trabajo es lo que lo convierte es lo que lo hace que sea político. Y también porque nuestro soporte es en la calle es donde ocurre todo. Y quiero rescatar esto de la calle porque para nosotros la calle es nuestra escuela. Yo creo que si nosotros nos hubiésemos formado así a ciegas solamente en academias, universidades, lo más seguro es que tendríamos otra visión del arte y lo más probable es que a lo mejor estaríamos exponiendo en museos, qué sé yo. Pero nosotros lo que nos mueve es plasmar la realidad que nosotros vivimos en el cotidiano y que me afecta a mí, le afecta a mi hermano, le afecta a mi familia, a mis vecinos, a mis amigos, que es la realidad que vivimos cotidianamente. Eso es lo que nos interesa expresar a nosotros en los muros y por eso creemos que lo que hacemos nosotros es político y recalco nuevamente que no concebimos otra forma de expresarnos que no sea esta.
I want to thank Cece. I want to thank Ras. I want to thank Pablo and Chantilly who stuck with us and engaged in this conversation. I think there are certain things that are important to highlight. You know, I really appreciated Ras, you coming through and saying, you know, we need to break through that elitist concept of what art is and what culture is. Like the sole aspect of survival is art, you know, and I think that that's real. I think it's real that when we're thinking about what we produce in life, we're producing a shift of culture. We are culture producers and creators. And so I appreciate that. I think, you know, the levels of optimism and the connection with community that both Pablo and Cece brought forth are really important, and how that is a political act in itself. You know, being able to connect with folks and also being able to inform ourselves and then go back and educate, you know, having that dialectic, that, you know, that constant communication be a piece to the work, you know, that beats, you know, any type of institution, that beats any type of schooling, because ultimately what we're doing is edifying the intellect of our people and edifying our own intellect in relationship to, you know, and even when we think about, you know, we think and talk a lot about political formation and theory in TPF, and we think about it and talk about it as something that is also engaged with communities, is engaged with organizing, is engaged with struggle. It can't happen in a vacuum. And so I think you all have been doing amazing work in the realm of not only the subjectivity, but also collecting and uplifting the stories of our people in ways that are visual, you know, visible. Something that you said, Cece, stuck with me, and I just want to share it before I hand it off to Sierra to do the closing. I think it's important for us to understand what remains. You know, like we need to think about the bones, like, you know, that ancestry as well, like that spirit that lingers. And when we're talking about music, when we're talking about song, when we're talking about visuals, we're talking about things that stay. Like the imagery, the song, the music, that stays and that moves. I mean, I know I've been singing, I sing songs that, you know, my mom used to sing, that her grandmother used to sing, you know. I could see imagery that I saw on my block when, you know, folks got murdered and murals were erupted, you know, like, so I think it's important for us to know the importance of art and culture, our role and relationship to it, our capacity as cultural producers, and we need to be also intelligent about how we consume art and culture, because when we're talking about the consumption of it, we're talking about something that becomes commodified and something that becomes an object that ultimately is towards the interest of the ruling class. And so I appreciate you all. I love y'all. Thank you all so much for engaging in conversation with us in this installment of the Green Room. And Sierra, take us home.
Love back at you.
Oh, sorry, I realized I was on mute. Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you so much to the panelists. I just have really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned so much throughout this discussion, and thank you all for the work that you're doing as well. It's just so important. Also, shout out to the folks at the People's Forum who have supported the Green Room series, especially Juan, Sungmo, Belen, Bryant, different folks who have really given their love and labor into you know, this series and the People's Forum overall. We wanted to talk about, you know, the fact we mentioned before that prior to the pandemic, prior to the, you know, current economic crisis, there were already 140 million poor people in the United States unable to afford a $200 emergency. You know, folks who have not had access to healthcare. We'd like to lift up the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. We mentioned the Poor People's Campaign earlier with Dr. King, and this is really bringing back those values and understanding the systemic ways in which all of us are have been exploited and oppressed, specifically around King's three evils of systemic racism, of poverty, of materialism, and extreme militarism. And the campaign today also talks about ecological devastation and a distorted moral narrative. And so this weekend, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival, is holding a mass people's assembly and moral march on Washington online. It's a 2.5-hour program that will broadcast tomorrow at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern. And again, Sunday, June 21st at 6 p.m. You can find out more at june2020.org. And Claudia, would you like to talk about El Terror?
El terror.
I'm
mean,
trying.
it's okay.
I'm trying.
You're doing all right with the Spanish. I gotta give it to you. You're trying at least. So on Sunday at 6 p.m., we are inviting everyone to tune in live for a celebration of the life of Luis El Terror Diaz, who happened to be one of the best composers and musicians in the Dominican Republic in the last, probably the last 50 years. A lot of his music has been utilized throughout the world, and we are doing a musical rendition and honoring of his life on the 21st, and that's this Sunday at 6 p.m. So if you could all connect, that will be awesome. We'll have some invited guests, folks that worked with him. He passed in 2009. But his legacy, like the legacies that we see represented in this panel and with the folks that we're in relationship to, continues to live on, and that's part of our task, to reclaim that radical legacy and that radical spirit of folks that have given their time and energy for the advancement of our people. So please join us. I want to also join in the thanks to the TPF family, David and Juan and Leon and everybody and their mama who've been helping and supporting and creating these spaces that are so very necessary at this time. And I also want to thank Alvaro and Julieta and the whole crew of interpreters that are always willing and down to just get on and do this job in order for us to be able to communicate more clearly with each other. So thank you. Thank everyone who has joined us. We love y'all. We'll see you soon.